Welcome back to Money Media. James here, and today we are going to discuss wealth inequality. What is wealth inequality? Why do we have it? And what you can do about it. So, to define wealth inequality, we first need to define what wealth is. And so, wealth, for me, the word wealth, is interchangeable with the word asset ownership, or the term asset ownership. And so, when we say somebody is wealthy, what we really mean is that they have a certain level of ownership of assets. So what are assets? Well, assets are things that tend to go up in value over time. So some common types of assets that we may encounter are things like stocks, ownership in businesses, precious metals such as gold and silver, and land. It's kind of a broad term for, in being an asset ownership, is kind of a broad term for wealth. So if you own a certain number of assets, then there's a good chance that you have a certain level of wealth. If you don't own any assets, then you probably don't have a certain level of wealth or much wealth to your name. Now, what is inequality? Inequality merely is just another word for an unequal distribution of something. So therefore, we could gauge that wealth inequality, especially in this context, what we're merely talking about is an unequal distribution of asset ownership within a society. So why does wealth inequality exist? Well, as developed economies tend to get older, wealth tends to concentrate into smaller and smaller groups. And I'm going to explain why that is. So, people who are wealthy, they generally understand that their wealth is derived from asset ownership. So, when the wealthy have excess cash, what they do is they buy assets. And now, with assets comes income, which is excess cash essentially. And so when the wealth have excess cash from those other assets, what do they do with it? They buy more assets. And you can see how this cycle continues. And so when the wealthy have children, they pass down this same knowledge of asset ownership equals wealth. And so their children engage in this behavior, and then their children engage in this behavior, and so on and so forth. And so you start to quickly see over periods of time that wealth tends to accumulate or concentrate within families. And it's quite a natural process. Now, what I've seen recently with wealth inequality, especially in Australia, where I live, but also many other developed nations around the world, in the past few years, wealth inequality has increased significantly, especially since COVID. And there's a really simple reason for that, and I want to run you through that now. So during COVID, we saw a lot of excess cash being printed by the central banks. And when that cash enters the system, people tend to spend it. Now, where do people spend excess money? They tend to spend it buying goods and services. So that excess cash ends up in the hands of people who own assets, which essentially are the wealthy. So during COVID, the wealthy had an excess of cash flow, an increase in cash flow from all the goods and all the additional goods and services being purchased. So the wealthy during COVID have excess cash on hand. Now, what do the wealthy do when they have excess cash? They purchase assets. Now, when the demand for assets increases, the price of those assets generally increase as well, so long as the supply isn't increased alongside it. So you've got asset prices going up. And now who owns assets? Well, the wealthy. So asset values were going up naturally, which is equating to the wealthy getting wealthier. Now, there was another thing that happened during COVID, which I mentioned a moment ago, which was the excess cash being put into circulation. And so with excess cash in the system or in the economy, that reduces the value of the money or the cash. So you've got two really powerful forces pushing asset prices up. You've got an increase in demand without an increase in supply, and you've also got inflation, which is driving the asset prices up also. So you can see there from this really simple example of how the wealth naturally just became wealthier. And now, what about those that don't own assets or don't have wealth? Now, those that don't have wealth, i.e. those who don't have really any or small amounts of asset ownership, what do they own? Generally speaking, they probably have some savings, right? So savings, cash in the bank. What happened to cash during COVID? Well, the value dropped. And so not only have you got the wealth getting wealthier because their asset values are rising, but you've also got those who don't have wealth falling behind because they've got a depreciating asset, which is cash. Now, I live in Australia, and we are a developed economy here in Australia, but we are quite young. We're a very young economy relative to the world. And there's quite a few other economies around the world as well in a similar position. But one of the major ones is the United States. Now, they're a relatively new economy. England, not so much. But speaking to those economies, specifically those economies that are a little bit younger relative to the rest of the world, it means that if you aren't wealthy or you're not content with your level of wealth at the moment, that you still have a real opportunity to increase your wealth. Because as economies increase in age, wealth tends to concentrate into smaller and smaller percentages of the population. And so it's really important to understand that being a relatively young economy means that wealth inequality is going to increase as time goes on. Now, and we will find, just naturally, we will find in this economy of Australia that those who have nots in the system, there will come a time when they have no chance anymore to become the other side of the coin or become the haves in the society who own assets. And so we're not there yet, but we will be it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but at some point in the future, and it will sneak up quick, there will come a time where those who don't have a level of asset ownership will be locked out of the economy, essentially, and their children and their children's children, etc. Now, this all sounds quite doom and gloom, but it's not if you're willing to do something about it and take steps. And so that brings me to my third point in this video is, what can you do about it? During my career, being in and around business and finance, I've come to broadly define three key areas or reasons rather, of why people over a long period of time or throughout their lifetime don't accumulate wealth. Three main reasons. The first one is motivation. So somebody may understand that investing for themselves, for their future, for their family is the right thing to do. However, they're still not motivated to do it. And so they're looking at things that offer short-term pleasure, which more often than not are actually liabilities, things that go down in value. So this might be updating their car every 2 years. This might be hanging on to their Netflix subscription. This might be upgrading their technology regularly, etc. So motivation's number one. Second reason why I see a lot of people not accruing wealth over their lifetime is it's patience, essentially. So there are a lot of people who understand that investing is really important and it's good for their longevity in terms of wealth accrual, but they don't have the staying power to stick with their investments. So an example might be if you were to buy a stock in a company. I know Tesla's a great example. I never invested in Tesla, but I was looking at it in the early days, and I had a couple of friends who purchased it when it was at an exceptional price, and I remember speaking with them less than a year later, and they'd sold off their shares in Tesla to purchase something else, and so had they held on to that investment, which is a great investment in the long term, they would have done really well. So there's motivation, or lack of motivation rather, lack of patience. And the third one that I see that adds to people not being able to accrue wealth over their lifetime is a lack of knowledge or understanding. And now when I say lack of knowledge, I don't mean, not understanding the difference between an asset and a liability, which we talk about quite a lot on this channel, because the asset versus liability, it's a fairly easy concept to digest, and most people can latch onto it fairly quickly. When I talk about a lack of knowledge, I mean a broader, deeper understanding of the economy, of how everything works within the system, of which asset classes perform better during which times of the economic cycle. And so it's a lack of that deep understanding of how money works in the system and how they can make their money work within the system during any period. And that's what we're addressing in this channel. So look, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't help you with your lack of motivation, and I can't help you with your lack of patience. But I'm an economist, so I can assist you in if your weakness is a lack of knowledge and understanding about investment, about business, and how the system works. Now, when we talk about solutions for wealth inequality, there's what I'm seeing quite common at the moment is the whole tax the rich. It's the billionaires' fault that our economy is like this, and so we need to take more of their money. Now, I'm actually all for a fair and equitable tax system, but taxing the rich isn't the solution. And we've made a bunch of other content around why I believe that, and I'll continue to talk to that as well throughout this channel of why it's simply from an economic perspective, it's really not the solution. What I believe the solution to wealth inequality is arming yourself with the tools and the knowledge to be able to invest your money and have your money work for you. And if you want to take that journey, and I would love to be a part of that. Here at Money Media, we would love to be a part of that. And so if that is what you're wanting to do, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, so to speak, and continue on your wealth accrual journey, subscribe to Money Media. That way YouTube will give you a little bit of a nudge every time we upload a video, which at the moment is daily. And I believe we're planning on continuing that because it enables us to get out enough content to empower our viewers, you guys, with the skills and the knowledge as quickly as possible, basically, so you can get going with what you're trying to do in your life. But look, that's all I was wanting to speak to today is the wealth equality. What is wealth equality and why it occurs and what you can do about it, because you have the power. And if you are in one of these relatively young economies, young developed economies, Australia, New Zealand, United States, the power is in your hands. It really is right now. And I urge you, I implore you strongly, I encourage you to take that opportunity and run with it. take full advantage. Anyway, guys, that's me. James here, Money Media. It's great to have you again. I'll see you for the next video.